A poor boy was humiliated in front of his entire class when a rich student mocked his torn, worn-out shoes. The laughter was loud, and no one stood up for him except one girl. She defended him with such courage that the entire room went silent. Years later, that same boy had become a successful man, but he never forgot her kindness. Then one day, he received a wedding invitation. When he saw the bride's name, his heart stopped. It was her, the girl who had saved him from shame all those years ago. He decided to attend, but what he discovered at that wedding changed both of their lives forever. The truth that came out that day was something neither of them had expected. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. David Carter grew up in a small neighborhood on the edge of the city. His family lived in a cramped apartment with peeling paint and a roof that leaked when it rained. His father worked long hours at a factory, and his mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. Despite their struggles, David's parents made sure he went to school every day. Education, they told him, was the only way out. David listened. He studied hard, often by candlelight when the electricity was cut off. He dreamed of a better life, not just for himself, but for his family. School, however, was not kind to David. He attended a public school where most students came from families that were either middle class or wealthy. David stood out, and not in a good way. His clothes were old and too small. His backpack had been stitched and restitched so many times it barely held together. But the worst part was his shoes. They were so worn that the soles had separated from the fabric, and he had tied them together with string just to keep them on his feet. Every day David walked into school knowing that people noticed, and every day he kept his head down, hoping to be invisible. One afternoon during lunch, David was sitting alone at a table in the corner of the cafeteria. He was eating a simple sandwich his mother had packed for him when a group of boys approached. The leader of the group was Kyle, a loud and arrogant student whose father owned several businesses in the city. Kyle had always enjoyed making fun of others, especially those who couldn't fight back. He stopped in front of David's table, looked down at his shoes, and laughed. "Hey, everyone, look at this!" Kyle shouted, loud enough for the entire cafeteria to hear. "David's shoes are held together with string. What is this? The Stone Age?" The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Students turned to look, some pointing, others pulling out their phones to record. David's face burned with shame. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to run. But his legs wouldn't move. Kyle wasn't finished. He bent down, grabbed one of David's shoes, and held it up like a trophy. "This thing should be in a museum," he said, tossing it across the room. More laughter. David felt tears sting his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He sat frozen, humiliated, waiting for it to end. Then, a voice cut through the noise. "That's enough." Everyone turned. Standing near the door was a girl named Sophie. She wasn't the most popular student, but she was well-liked and known for being kind. She walked straight toward Kyle, her expression calm but firm. "Give him back his shoe," she said. Kyle smirked. "Why? Are you his girlfriend or something?" Sophie didn't flinch. "No, I'm just someone who knows the difference between being strong and being cruel, and what you're doing right now is cruel." The cafeteria went silent. Kyle's smirk faded. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in front of everyone. Sophie walked over, picked up David's shoe from the floor, and brought it back to him. She placed it gently on the table and looked him in the eye. "Don't let them make you feel small," she said quietly. "You're worth more than they'll ever understand." David couldn't speak. He just nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Sophie turned back to Kyle. "If you spent half the energy you use laughing at others actually being a decent person, maybe people would respect you." Then she walked away. The room stayed quiet for a long moment before conversation slowly resumed. Kyle and his friends left, embarrassed and deflated. David sat there staring at his shoe, replaying Sophie's words in his mind. No one had ever stood up for him like that before. From that day on, David noticed Sophie more. She never treated him like he was different. She smiled at him in the hallways, sat near him in class, and once even shared her lunch when she saw he didn't have much. They didn't become close friends, but her kindness stayed with him. It became a quiet force that pushed him forward. Every time he felt like giving up, he remembered the girl who had stood up for him when no one else would. Years passed. David finished high school at the top of his class and earned a full scholarship to university. He studied business and economics, working part-time jobs to support himself. After graduation, he started his own company. It wasn't easy. There were failures, setbacks, and nights when he questioned everything, but he kept going. Slowly, his business grew. Within a decade, David had become one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the region. He owned multiple companies, employed hundreds of people, and lived in a beautiful home. But despite all his success, he never forgot where he came from. He donated to schools, funded scholarships, and made sure that kids like him had a chance to succeed. One afternoon, while going through his mail, David found a wedding invitation. The envelope was elegant, with gold trim and delicate handwriting. He opened it and read the names. The bride's name made his heart skip a beat. Sophie Lane. It was her. The girl from the cafeteria, the one who had defended him all those years ago. David stared at the invitation for a long time, memories flooding back. He wondered what her life had been like. He wondered if she remembered him. He wondered if attending the wedding would be strange, but despite his doubts, he knew he had to go. He owed her that much. The wedding was held at a luxurious venue on the outskirts of the city. David arrived dressed in a tailored suit, blending in with the other guests. The ceremony was beautiful. Sophie looked radiant in her white dress, smiling as she walked down the aisle. Her groom, a tall man with a confident smile, waited for her at the altar. David watched from the back, feeling a strange mix of happiness and sadness. He was happy for her. She deserved all the joy in the world, but there was also a quiet ache in his chest, a reminder of what might have been if life had been different. After the ceremony, guests moved to the reception hall for dinner and dancing. David found a seat at one of the tables near the back. He planned to stay for a polite amount of time, then leave quietly. But before he could settle in, someone tapped him on the shoulder. He turned and saw Sophie standing there, still in her wedding dress, her eyes wide with surprise. "David?" she said, her voice soft with disbelief. He stood, suddenly nervous. "Hi, Sophie. Congratulations." She stared at him for a moment, then broke into a wide smile. "I can't believe you're here. I didn't think you'd come. I wasn't even sure you'd remember me." David shook his head. "I could never forget you." Sophie's expression shifted, something unspoken passing between them. She gestured toward a quieter corner of the room. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" David nodded and followed her. They stood near a window overlooking the garden, away from the noise of the party. Sophie looked at him, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "I heard about your success," she said. "Everyone has. You've done so well, David. I'm so proud of you." He smiled humbly. "I wouldn't be here without you. What you did that day in the cafeteria, it changed everything for me. You made me believe I was worth something." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I just did what anyone should have done." David shook his head. "No, most people didn't. You did, and I never got the chance to thank you properly. So thank you, Sophie, for everything." Sophie wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "What is it?" She hesitated, then reached into a small pocket hidden in her dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to him. "Read this, please." David unfolded the paper carefully. It was an old letter, written in a child's handwriting. As he read, his breath caught in his throat. The letter was addressed to a boy named David. It talked about wanting to help him, about seeing him struggle and wishing she could do more. It ended with a single line, "One day, I hope you know that you mattered to me." David looked up at Sophie, confused. "When did you write this?" She smiled sadly. "The day after the cafeteria incident. I wrote it but never gave it to you. I was too shy. I kept it all these years." David's chest tightened. "Why are you showing me this now?" Sophie's voice broke. "Because I need you to understand something. That day in the cafeteria wasn't random. I didn't just happen to be there. I saw what Kyle was doing and I couldn't stand by. But the reason I cared so much..." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "The reason I cared so much is because I understood what it felt like to be invisible. My family looked fine on the outside, but we were struggling too. My father had just lost his job. We were barely holding on. I saw myself in you, David, and I wanted you to know that you weren't alone." David felt tears prick his eyes. "I had no idea." Sophie nodded. "No one did. We were good at hiding it. But that's why your success means so much to me. Seeing you rise above everything, it gave me hope too." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of shared history settling between them. Finally, David spoke. "Why tell me this now, on your wedding day?" Sophie smiled through her tears. "Because I wanted you to know that kindness matters. What I did for you, you've done for hundreds of others through your work. You've created something beautiful out of pain. And I wanted to say thank you for that, for proving that people like us can make it." David pulled her into a gentle hug. "You're an incredible person, Sophie. I'm so glad you found happiness." She hugged him back. "So am I. And I'm glad you're here. It means the world to me." When they pulled apart, Sophie's new husband appeared, smiling warmly. Sophie introduced them, and the two men shook hands. The rest of the evening was filled with laughter, dancing, and celebration. David stayed longer than he planned, enjoying the warmth of the moment. Before he left, Sophie walked him to the door. "Promise me you'll stay in touch," she said. David nodded. "I promise." As David drove home that night, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. From a boy with broken shoes to a man who could change lives, from shame to strength. And at the center of it all was one act of kindness from a girl who saw him when no one else did. He realized then that success wasn't just about money or status. It was about remembering where you came from and lifting others as you climbed. Sophie had lifted him, and now it was his turn to do the same for others. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.